Hi, I'm Ed Bacon, the rector of All Saints Church, Pasadena. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey of faith, I hope that you'll find something here that speaks to you. Welcome.
May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be aligned with your love, O God, our strength, our courage, and our freedom. Amen. As they're leaving, I want to thank the 100 plus members of our children's choirs for that amazing anthem. We commissioned that piece to make sure that we could take a stand against bullying as a parish, and we are very, very happy that the composer, Karen Thomas, the artistic director of Seattle Pro Musica, is with us today. Karen, thank you very, very, very much. I thought it was quite an ingenious move to bring the poetry of Emily Dickinson into play and service against bullying. That is pretty doggone innovative, and my hat's off to you. And speaking of innovation, I love the fact that our Flower Guild made sure that we would still have altar flowers, but to make room for 100 plus kids up here, they put them on these columns. I'm grateful to Gary Leonard for such a brilliant notion. And while I'm speaking about music, I must announce now, not later, that as of last night, Shimon Grab, our associate organist choir master, after 5 intense years of study at the USC School of Music, received his Doctor of Music of Arts degree. He may now officially be called Dr. Grab. His degree is in organ performance with minors in sacred music, choral music, and music education. But all of you who are his close friends can continue to call him Shimon. Jesus draws our attention to a certain widow in today's gospel lesson. She enters the temple to pray, and before doing so, she places her 2 copper coins, or her penny, or what has come to be known as the widow's mite, into the collection box. It's all that she has. She makes this act of giving without any fanfare. No one notices because she does nothing to bring attention to herself. This is in marked contrast to the professional religious people who are on the scene, who can always be counted on doing everything religious in such a way that others are going to pay attention. Jesus, in another passage, calls them actors without substance to distinguish from All Saints actors who all have substance. Or hypocrites, is what he calls them. But in the case of the widow, no one notices her except Jesus. I imagine that he notices her because at this point in his life, approaching its end, Jesus is very sensitive. In fact, he's probably on the lookout, in my imagination, for other people who embody the spirit that he's feeling called to embody. That spirit of life that comes out of how any of us answer one of the most important questions of all of life. This crucial question of life is, how much of our life will we give for the healing of the world or the benefit of others? And how much are we going to keep for ourselves? I think Jesus saw in this person, this woman, someone who had decided to give all that she had for the healing of her country, her community, her people, This person who had been widowed, which interestingly enough in Hebrew means emptied, and who had learned to give her all. She became an example of faith and an example of what the healthiest form of life is. And consequently, Jesus calls together his disciples to point to this widow as someone embodying the healthiest philosophy of life. So let me punctuate. The way that healing comes into the world actually comes from people who have figured out and aligned themselves with how God has created the world to work. And they've committed themselves to become a part of that inner working of the world. The way God has created the world to work is this. When people and nations work devotedly for the good of others, they achieve their own enrichment in the process. When we decide we are going to give our lives for the good of others, we become enriched in the process. I'm quoting from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his description, in his wonderful book, Chaos or Community, Where Do We Go From Here? His description of reality itself. He says, reality hinges on moral foundations. Now, we can turn on the TV and be offered all the time, every day, the notion or principle that self-preservation is the first law of life. But Jesus and the Bible in its best parts, and Dr. King and Archbishop Tutu and Eleanor Roosevelt and so many others who have reached a certain level of transformation and unity with the way the world works, they all teach us that self-preservation as the first law of life is a false assumption. Rather, other preservation is the first law of life. Dr. King said, other preservation is the first law of life because we cannot preserve self without being concerned about preserving other selves. The universe is so structured that things go awry if human beings are not diligent in their cultivation of the other regarding dimension of life. I cannot reach fulfillment without thou. The self cannot be self without other selves. Self-concern without other concern is like a tributary that has no outward flow to the ocean. Stagnant, still, and stale. It lacks both life and freshness. Nothing would be more disastrous and out of harmony with our self-interest than for the developed nations to travel a dead-end road of inordinate selfishness. So, we are all interdependent. Every person and every nation is an heir of a vast treasury of ideas and labor to which both the living and the dead of all nations and all people have contributed. Whether we realize it or not, each of us lives eternally in the red. We are everlasting debtors to known and unknown men and women. All life is interrelated. The agony of the poor impoverishes the rich, and the betterment of the poor enriches the rich. We are inevitably our brothers and sisters' keepers because we are our brothers and sisters' brothers and sisters. What affects one directly affects all indirectly. I'm grateful that the story of the widow's mite has fallen on the Sunday after the presidential election. And on the Sunday, we are marking as Children's Advocacy Sunday. I'm sure I speak for you in saying that I am so relieved that the arduous and polarizing 2012 presidential campaign has come to an end. And it's come to a decisive end with no challenge to the electoral college victory and a notable margin in the popular vote. We are not as divided as the sensationalized media would suggest. And I rush to say that this sermon is not a partisan victory march. All Saints Church Pasadena is a big tent. And all of you know how important it is to me to make sure that we preserve our nonpartisan nature here. We have faithful, prayerful members who are Democrats and faithful, prayerful members who are Republicans and independents and people who voted for all sorts of people for president. And so we will not be leading a celebration party as an institution. It is too important to make sure that all feel included in this place. And while we do not lift up one candidate or party over another, we do lift up policies. And we can, I think, celebrate that the U.S. electorate seems to be clearly supportive of peace and public education and care and jobs for veterans and care and jobs for all people, health care in general, as well as equal rights for women, for racial minorities, for immigrants, and the LGBT community. It is really clear that this nation believes that women are the initial and most important and foundational moral actor in taking care of their bodies and making decisions about their health. It is those values and many more that people of faith must lift up in the ongoing relationship that All Saints Church has with the Oval Office in the White House, whoever sits there. Since the presidency of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, All Saints Church Pasadena has had a unique and impassioned relationship with the presidency. Dr. Frank Scott, my predecessor's predecessor's predecessor, used this very pulpit and his office as All Saints Rector to protest Roosevelt's internment of Japanese Americans and went to Union Station to try to block those trains. My immediate predecessor, George Regas, preached one of his most important sermons directed at the president about the Vietnam War. Mr. President, the decision is we must leave. Dr. King and Archbishop Tutu and so many others claim that God's universe is a moral one with an arc that bends toward justice and inclusion. And there is no doubt about it, no doubt in my mind that the people of All Saints Church have a responsibility to engage in prayerful, nonviolent action that cooperates with God in the bending of that arc. And interestingly enough, President Obama himself offered a suggestion about the kind of relationship we should have with the presidency. When he spoke at a small New Jersey campaign event when he was first running for president, someone asked him what he would do about the Middle East. And he answered with a story about the legendary 20th century organizer A. Philip Randolph. Mr. Randolph had a meeting with President Roosevelt. And Randolph described to FDR the condition of black people in America, the condition of working people. And reportedly, FDR listened intently and then replied, "Mr. Randolph, I agree with everything you've said. Now go out there and make me do it." That is the message that the President of the United States is sending to people of faith. I agree with your values. Now go out there and make me do it. Today, we hold up our partnership with Children's Defense Fund, led by Marion Rod Edelman. Today, we observe Children's Sabbath Sunday, Children's Advocacy Sunday, and focus on the fact that 16.1 million children in America, more than 1 in 5, more than 20%, are poor. The majority living in working families, not in families where parents are not working. And the burden of poverty falls disproportionately on minority children, with 1 in 3 black children and 1 in 3 Latino children affected, compared to more than 1 in 10 white children. Poor children lag behind their peers in many ways beyond income. They are less healthy, they trail in emotional and intellectual development, they do not perform as well in school. The challenges that poor children face accumulate and interact, casting long shadows throughout their lives. Arithmetic became very important in this past race. We learned to pay attention to people who were actually doing the math. We have to do the math on poverty for children. For every year that we keep children in poverty, it costs our nation $500 billion in lost productivity, poorer health, and increased crime. We must end poverty through investments in high-quality education for every child, livable wages for families, income supplements like the earned income and child tax credits, job training and job creation, and work supports like child care and health care. And in our relationship with the Oval Office, we have to bring into common parlance a word about mass incarceration and what it is doing to human lives. An African American boy born in 2001 has a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison in his lifetime. A Latino boy, a 1 in 6 chance. A white boy, a 1 in 17 chance. And in 2003, almost 15,000 girls were incarcerated, 1 in every 7 juveniles in residential placement. Here's the math. States spend about 3 times as much money per prisoner as per public school pupil. 3 times as much money. Unless we focus our efforts on early intervention and prevention rather than punishment, we are robbing thousands of youth each year of their futures and our country of vital human resources. It is not something to be proud of that we devote more resources to military defense than the next 10 countries combined. And that money could go to millions of children who go to bed hungry. Others attend schools that lack basic educational materials or where a talent for art or music withers because these subjects, considered extraneous to the labor market, but central to human development and happiness, have been cut from the curriculum. Thank God for the state of California passing Proposition 30 that will staunch the bleed of draconian cuts in education. 20% of our budget and more than half of all discretionary spending goes to defense spending. That's an entitlement that does not have to be protected. Dr. King said the real reason we must use our resources to outlaw poverty goes beyond material concerns to the quality of our mind and our spirit. Deeply woven into the fiber of our religious tradition is the conviction that human beings are made in the image of God and that they are souls of infinite metaphysical value. If we accept this as a profound moral fact, we cannot be content to see children and other people go hungry, to see children victimized with ill health when we have the means to help them. In the final analysis, we must not ignore the poor, we rich people, because rich and poor are tied together. Other preservation is the first law of life. And when we care and enrich the lives of others, our lives are enriched. I love that Emily Dickinson poem that our kids sang, "Let Little Children Lead Us." Dickinson wrote, "If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life, the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin into his nest again, I shall not live in vain." As American citizens of faith, in our relationship with our President, with Congress, with the Senate, let us not live in vain.